History Inside a Nutshell, the show where we sail into our port of call discussing maritime history.
Wow, we're back with another video, another interview video with Jake. Jake, hello again.
Hello, everyone. Again.
I think it's just kind of one of these things that you have a feeling to say, you cannot get away from the channel.
No, I've got too much to say. I like to speak, as people will, testify to. So, yeah.
Oh, but it's really always really good to have you on as usual, Jake, because I know that today you're going to be saying something that's really outside your comfort zone. Because you said to me before we were recording that you're used to history on the Olympic class liners, and then the not the Britannic, the Lusitania, the Mauretania, but the ship that we're going to be talking about today, it has a Titanic, well, not Titanic, it has a Britannic connection.
Yeah.
But it's a different ship. Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, her name was the Burdigala, but she didn't start off with that name. She started off with the Kaiser Frederick for the German line, which was the NDL, which was the German line that actually helped pay for the construction of the ship. But she has quite a rocky history, rocky career, shall I say. She wasn't the most reliable ship that ever floated, shall I say. She caused a lot of trouble for people that owned her, and it also got to the point that the ship was that unreliable, and she caused that many problems with her companies that they would lay her up for so long. I think the longest that she was laid up for was 12 years, or around about 12 years.
No.
It's what they call mothballed, because she caused so many issues. You see, the Burdigala was she was built for speed. Just like the Lusitania and the Mauretania. She was built for speed. She was built to capture the blue ribbon, the gold. Every company was after that. But unfortunately, she had so many problems with, fuel consumption, engine problems, and mechanical problems, that she didn't meet to the spec that the companies would they would have hoped for her to make, and she would be passed from pillar to post with different companies, and eventually, sadly, she would meet a tragic end, just like Britannic. She would end up on the seafloor. So it's really sad. She was first launched in 1887, and with all the hopes of hoping for the company that because that's what the hope is. But she, not only was she built for speed, but she was also built for luxury. She was a very luxurious ship, especially for her day. She was very pretty, shall I say. But on her maiden voyage, her first signs of trouble started, and her first voyage was around 1898. And she had engine problems, and she also met some very bad weather during her maiden voyage, and it got to the point that during her voyage that two of her engines failed completely. Yeah, one was out for 20 hours, the other one was out for 11 hours. But lucky enough for the passengers on board, not both of them went together. She had two engines, and lucky enough, they didn't quite go together. It was one after the other. The left engine went out, and lucky enough, the right engine was still going. So it still propelled her. But they were trying to capture the blue ribbon by shortening the voyage. And because of these engines being out, it actually took 7 days for the voyage. And I think they were trying to get the voyage down to at least 5 days. Because, the longest was about between 6 or 7 days. And what they were trying to do with the Kaiser Frederick at the time, that's what her name was at the time, was to try and, beat those records. And unfortunately, it didn't go their way. there was also reports that maybe that she was fed not very good coal, which didn't help the situation. But and also the company that they hired for that particular voyage wasn't, the crew, the coalmen and the firemen were not exactly experienced at all. So like I say, she was really a turbulent ship right from the off, and it caused a lot of problems. And there was a few times that she'd end up back in the shipyard, for repairs and alterations. So she was a right pain in the bee. She really was. Yeah.
Or a pain in the propeller.
In the propeller, yeah. Then the Hamburg America line took out. They purchased her, and they ran her for a little while. And again, she was causing problems where she wasn't. She was supposed to reach around the 23 knot mark, but at best she was only making 20 knots at best. So she wasn't performing to her full potential, or at least what she was built for. So I think for the time, the technology, I mean, because obviously when Titanic and Lusitania and that was built, technology had come on a little bit more. So they were able to push the boundaries a little bit. I think this was, a very early stage. This was like this, I suppose, even though the Burdigala and she had all these troubles, I think it pushed the limit, and unfortunately technology just wasn't quite there, and she had the problems. And I think that was the problem. It was the time she was built. I think if she was built sort of when the Lusitania and Mauretania was built, maybe she might have been better off because the technology had come on. But maybe also, if you think about it, the Burdigala may have paved the way for that, because they thought, well, this ain't working, that ain't working, maybe we can do something different. You see what I mean? She may have paved the way. She may have been the mother of what the Lusitania and Mauretania would become, because they were built for speed, just like the Kaiser Frederick was. So like I said, the Hamburg company took over for a while. They ran her for a little while, and again, she was performing. There wasn't any major mechanical problems, but it was still she just wasn't performing to her full potential. She wasn't quite getting there, and it got to the point that the Hamburg America line wanted to focus more on auxiliary cruisers and bigger liners. So then they pushed the Kaiser Frederick to the side, and they docked her for quite some time. And I think she was docked from around 1900 to 1910. So she was docked for quite some time, mothballed in a sense, and she was forgotten. And then she was eventually picked up by the French line by the French in around 1912, around the 1st of May 1912.
So
not
age gap, isn't it? Yeah.
So not long after the Titanic had sunk that year. So obviously that was clearly fresh in people's minds still. It was only a month after less than a month after the Titanic had gone down. Anyway, the French again found problems with her. She was causing problems again. Not majorly. It was again not performing to her full potential. I mean, she was all right for what she was. What she was designed. Like I say, she was doing the oceans. Crossing the oceans and that, but she just wasn't performing to her full potential again. And she was again laid up again in 1913, mothballed again. It wasn't until a year later that she was picked up again, but this time she would be, because of the outbreak of the war, she would be picked up to be an auxiliary cruiser at first for the French. Then she was a troop ship, and so it's really sad, because that would eventually be the end of the, because she was renamed the Burdigala, shall I say, in going a bit forward, but she was renamed the Burdigala by the French in 1912, around that time, when they picked her up. But then, like I said, she was a French cruiser, and then auxiliary cruiser, then she was a troop ship. And then during that time, she would be going between the French, the French ports, and then the Dardanelles campaign, which is where the Britannic and the Aquitaine was serving. So she was sailing. It was around the 14th of November, 1916, when the Burdigala, it was around 10:35 sort of time. She was just 2 nautical miles away from Kia Island, and no, the ship was practically empty. I mean, there was not many people on board, and then suddenly there was this loud explosion in the center of the ship, and the engine room began to flood. But the crew on board the Burdigala thought they'd been torpedoed, because they were actually firing, because the Burdigala had been fitted with around about 140 millimeter guns, 5.5 feet guns, and she was firing at something, because they thought they'd seen a periscope on the surface, so they were firing at it. But what they didn't realize is she'd been mined. She'd struck a mine laid by U-73. You see, going back to what I said before in my last videos, is that the British were unaware, and I don't think even the French were. The French and the British, particularly the British, were not aware that that the Germans had the technology to lay mines in deep water, and they were not going to tell the British this. The Germans weren't going to tell it, because they had the technology and they were going to use it, and they did. And unfortunately, the Burdigala came across one of these mines made by U-73, which would be the U-boat that would later sink the Britannic. So the engine room started to flood, and the captain immediately knew the ship was in serious trouble, because she took a 4-degree list practically straight away. She was flooding very quickly. So they were firing the guns and lowering the lifeboats in, and the boiler room started to become affected by the flooding. And the captain knew she was going to sink very quickly. I think the captain only gave it like 20 minutes for it to sink. Very lucky that anybody did survive the sinking, but they did. And after the ship had been abandoned, and it was said that the gun that they used, I think it was either the stern or the bow, had exploded because it had its watertight plug still in the gun. So that exploded. But I know when Richie Kohler and his team dived the Burdigala back in 2016, and I think it's in that documentary. You'll have to have a look. Mystery of the Britannic. I think it's in there.
Yes.
And I think they actually sent divers on the wreck, and the gun seemed to be intact. So I don't know whether that actually happened. The explosion of the gun. So because the gun seemed to be okay. But it was reported that the gun had exploded because it had its watertight plug still in its So anyway, they abandoned the ship, and after the ship was abandoned, there was a second explosion from the center of the ship, and it literally tore the ship in two. So just like Titanic, it sank in two pieces. It literally ripped the ship in two. But also, what was found on the wreck is that the propeller blades had been damaged, or they are damaged. The reason being is because the engines were still running at the time of its sinking. So even though the engines were flooding, the ship was put into reverse, because on the wreck, the telegraphs are in reverse, because the telegraphs are still standing. They're just standing on the bridge, not just as if frozen in time. was there. So as the ship sank, the propellers obviously hit the seabed and they damaged. So there are marks and, you know, like missing pieces from the blades. So the Burdigala literally sank within minutes. It didn't take long. And like I say, she sank in 2 pieces, and that's where she lies today, in 2 pieces. And amazingly, well, is that the word? But amazingly, practically everyone got off the ship alive, apart from 1 person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a 22-year-old Nicholas Lokos. He was a 20-year-old boy who had died from burns from a pipe that, you know, a steam pipe that had burst in the boiler room.
Oh.
So he died from his injuries. So only 1 didn't make it out, which is crazy to think that the ship sank in around 20 minutes and the ship blew up in the center of the ship and it came away in 2 pieces and only 1 person died and practically everyone got off. And even the captain survived. And it's, you think, you know, with the Lusitania sank within 18 minutes and took down 1,200, nearly 1,200 people. That, you know, the Titanic took 2.5 hours to sink, and she took down 1,500, nearly 1,500 people. And the Britannic took 30 lives. And yet the Burdigala sank in less time, you know, just like the Lusitania sank in just around 20 minutes and only 1 casualty. That's how I don't know how anybody survived the disaster. I really don't. So the Burdigala lies just on the other side of the Kia Channel, the Kia Island, and she's like I think she's like a mile away from where the Britannic lies, but she's in such pristine condition. And obviously there are areas of the wreck. I think the stern is practically collapsed on itself, but I mean everything else is in good condition. I mean, she's holding up very well. I mean the bridge is exposed and you can see the like I said, the telegraphs. You see that that they're in reverse. And this is what I always love about wreck sites, is they're a time capsule. They're a way into the past. You know, you look at a wreck just like the Burdigala or the Britannic, and you think, who was the last person to touch that, or who put that ship into reverse? You know, her last dying grasp, in a sense. It's crazy. It's crazy to think how these wreck sites capture us. You know, even after 100 years after they sank, it's still. I mean, the one thing that is amazing, and you'll see in the documentary Mystery of the Britannic, is when they go, because you do see the Burdigala, they actually explore the Burdigala, and they go through the crew inside the interior of the Burdigala, and they go through all the crew, like not the crew, but the soldiers that were, you know, that were on, and you've got rifles still lying next to the beds. You know, you wonder who was that, whose gun did that belong to? I mean, it's just clearly that this ship just suddenly exploded and they had no time to even pick up any rifles. It was that quick that it was just get out, because it was going down so quickly. So, and it's just you know, spectacular. It really is. But again, but because the Burdigala had sunk, and you know, like I said, the British were unaware that ships were being sunk by mines in the Kia Channel or the Zia Channel, which could have saved the Britannic if they had known. Because a week later, on the 21st of November 1916, the Britannic would be in the same area as the Burdigala had been only a week before, and the Britannic had exploded by the same minefield that the Burdigala had been fated to. That's what sunk her. And it's just amazing how, you know, if the British had been told, or not been told, but if the British knew that if the crew on the Burdigala had been aware that it was a mine and not a torpedo, and that was what was reported in newspapers and you know, whoever, whether it was an inquiry or whatever, if that had been reported and it got back to the British, maybe the Britannic may have never gone out, or they would have deemed those waters as unsafe, and they probably would have mine swept the area and cleared the mines so that it was safe for Britannic to get through and be saved. But because, you know, the French soldiers and the French crew that were on board had misunderstood, or not misunderstood, but had believed that it was a torpedo and not a mine, Britannic may have been saved, and, you know, Britannic may have never struck a mine by U-73, and Britannic may not be on the sea floor. But then you also look at it as, if the Britannic had been saved and she'd gone through the war and become a passenger ship, then she'd have been scrapped eventually. So then we wouldn't have her. So there's that. But yeah, the Burdigala could have saved the Britannic. And not just the Burdigala, but the Russell, the HMS Russell, which had been sunk just off Malta, the island of Malta. And she had also been struck by a minefield that U-73 had laid around Malta, and she rolled over. So she's completely on her, you know, on her roof, like on a deck, like she's like, it's just bottom. All you see is the ship's bottom. So obviously the guns were that heavy, they rolled the ship over. I think that happened to the Bismarck too. The Bismarck rolled too because of the heavy guns. But yeah, I mean, like I say, it's just amazing how these things are entwined. Fate, you know, it's as if fate just wasn't on the Olympic class liners side at all, you know, because the Burdigala could have saved her.
Yeah, I mean, and if the British actually found out a bit earlier, none of this would have happened, which is
Exactly. I mean, and that's another thing. I mean, if the British had known and the French had known that mines were being laid in the Zia Channel, maybe it could have saved the Burdigala. Maybe the Burdigala wouldn't have been on the sea floor. But I think with Burdigala, though, I think she would eventually have been scrapped because she just wasn't perform, like I said, with all the mechanical problems and the, you know, and she took a lot of fuel as well. She, you know, coal. She took a lot of coal for a ship that was supposed to take, you know, was built for, you know, that only had the top speed, or was built to have a top speed of 23 knots. She had a lot. She did consume a lot of coal. So I think eventually she either would have been sold off and scrapped because it just, you know, she'd have just been mothballed again, because she'd have been too expensive to cut to thingy, and the amount of times that she'd been in for repairs to solve her problems that she was having, it's begs to differ whether, if she had survived, would she have been, she'd been one or two things. She may have been a training school for for sailors, or she'd have been scrapped because she was just too costly to, one, to repair, two, to, I mean, you know, if you're keeping a ship mothballed, that's going to cost you as well, because you're docking it. That's going to cost you docking fees. You know, it's all that. It's you know, it's as if no one really wanted. It's as if the Burdigala was sort of an embarrassment. No one really wanted to claim her, and when she was claimed, she ran for a little while, and then they saw the problems, and then they would mothball her again. So it's as if they just pushed her to the side all the time, just because, I mean, it's not the ship's fault, you know. But she obviously, she was built for a reason, and she just wasn't quite there, you know. I think she'd been let down quite a bit, and you know, now she's on the bottom of the sea floor, and I suppose, in a way, we can appreciate her a little bit more because we can visit her, see her, and learn, you know. And I mean, a lot of you'll find as well that divers will use the Burdigala. She's not that far. I mean, the Britannic's 400 feet down, so the Burdigala is not that deep. I think she's only like 300 feet down, something like that. So they deep sea divers actually use the Burdigala as a training for the Britannic dive. So before they dive on Britannic, they will dive on the Burdigala first to test their equipment and to just get the feel of diving before they dive the deeper wreck, which is the Britannic. So like I say, the Burdigala is she's just an amazing ship. She really is. And she's got such a fascinating history, although albeit a little bit sad. She's actually a depth of 60 meters. I've got it down in my notes. That's how far she's down. She's 60 meters. So obviously with Britannic, she's a lot deeper. So they use Burdigala to dive on first before they dive on Britannic. And then they'll go and dive on Britannic because she's a little bit more challenging, you know. I know one of my friends who the DMV tenors group who have dived on Britannic. You know them, Jennifer Saletti, all that. They've dived on Burdigala. I've got videos of them diving on the wreck.
Wow.
Yeah, they sent me some amazing videos of their dive on her, and although Britannic, to them, they said that although Britannic is an amazing shipwreck, they actually were quite fascinated by the Burdigala and how beautiful she looks on the seafloor.
Wow.
She's become an underwater reef now, and she's become a time capsule because, you know, with Britannic, we've not many people have been able to get inside Britannic. You know, we can only see most of the time we only see the outside, the exterior of Britannic because of the ban of going inside of her. I know now it's been kind of lifted a little bit. Britannic is not so explored. You know, she's less explored than the Burdigala. But the Burdigala, you can go inside and see where, you know, you'll see like fountains and cups and you know, guns lying by soldiers' beds. And it's just a time capsule. It grips you, you know. I just sometimes wish that I had the ability to dive myself because I'd love to dive both Burdigala and Britannic. Yeah.
I hopefully you will get your wish one day, Jake. 'Cause you're
Hopefully.
bound determined you got that because I know you always nearly went on the Lusitania from last time when memory serves.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would have gone to the Lusitania. I mean, I was invited to I probably wouldn't have been able to dive the Lusitania because I mean that again, it does take skill. I mean, you have to be skilled. It's 300 feet down. It's 90 meters down. It's still deep, and you know, if you're not careful, you will. And it's also down on the Lusitania. It's pretty dark, cold, and murky, and it's, you know, visibility isn't great down there, and there's a lot of currents that will swipe you. You know, will push you out to sea. So you have to be really skilled when it comes to, you know, diving these wrecks, and you know, and the thing is with the Burdigala as well and the Britannic, they're in the busy shipping lanes as well. They are in a working shipping lane, so you will get like I know, for instance, when people are diving on those wrecks, there are notices that people are down there. But again, a ship only has to come within a few meters, and you will get the current from that ship going over. So, you know, the propulsion. So it takes a lot of, you know, skill, and it does take years and years of practice. It's not like one day you decide to say, I'm going to dive on the Lusitania or the Burdigala. No, you got years of practice yet. I think the best book that could probably, if anyone's interested in diving shipwrecks or interested in going into diving shipwrecks, I strongly suggest buy a few books. There's one by Richie Cola called The Last Olympian. And there is another one by Rick Antron, who works for the DMV Tenors Group. He is the photographer, the wreck photographer for that group. And he wrote a book about the Britannic. It's called Diving. I think it's called Exploring the Britannic or Expedition Britannic. I think it's called Expedition Britannic. And that really tells you what it really does take to dive these wrecks and these shipwrecks. You know, the gases, the years of practice. It really does go into depth of when you read it, because if you're not as experienced, and if you think one day I'm just going to dive the wreck of the Britannic, this book or these books will tell you that actually you can't just one day wake up and say I'm going to dive the Burdigala, or one day I'm going to dive the Lusitania. They will tell you that it takes years and years of practice. It can sometimes take up to 20 years of experience before you can dive these wrecks. I mean, even the most, and you've got to remember, even the most experienced divers get caught out. I mean, back in 2009, the first Britannic victim since the sinking was Richie Culler's best friend, or one of his best friends was Carl Spencer, who died of decompression sickness. And he died, and he wasn't, I think he was in his late 30s, 40s, between 39 and 40 years old. He had a family, had a wife, you know, children, never came back home. And that's what it takes to dive these wrecks. We just have to remember the divers. You know, it's a bit like stuntmen in movies. You know, people tend to forget the life, you know, them putting their lives at risk for our entertainment, and so the actors are safe, you know, just like, you know, divers keep us safe by giving us images and videos and things to look at and for us to study. So anyway, so yeah, that's really the history of the Burdigala. It's very short, because, you know, because of her, you know, past, you know, her history. I mean, a lot of the time she was docked up anyway. She was either passed to different companies, mothballed in docks, and forgotten, and she wasn't really remembered until at least, you know, or at least a major history did not really start until the war, when the war broke out, when she became an auxiliary cruiser and the guns were fitted to her, and then she was you know, a troop ship for the French. You know, that really is, I mean, like I say, there was a lot of legal issues through her history, a lot of company passing her from pillar to post, some running her for maybe a couple of months or a couple of voyages, and her not being able to reach her full potential because of mechanical problems, and or crew not even being experienced to run her, and, you know, like to propel her and things like that. There was a story is just so short and so brief because she was docked up for most of her life anyway. And then when she was put into actual purpose, like a real purpose, where she wasn't passed from pillar to post, she ended up being blown up and sunk. But what we have to remember is Burdigala, just like Britannic, may have been saved as well.
Yeah.
If only those countries were aware what the Germans were up to. And it's really sad. But like I said before, if she had been saved, would she have been scrapped, or would she have been just put into, or would she have been mothballed again and just left there to rot? Because I know when after a 12-year of mothball, they had to, I mean, they had to clean her up and everything because she'd been docked for so long, and they had to tie her up, they had to repaint her and things like that. They had to clean her up because she'd been forgotten. And then when it came to actually have been put into proper purpose, it would be her final time. And she now is on the bottom of the sea, and she's a beautiful ship, and she's a beautiful wreck. But just like Britannic, I mean, she's become something else now. She's still alive because she's now become an underwater reef. She's got sea life growing on her. She's got sponges and all that growing on her now. So she's gone from one purpose to another purpose. And I think actually now she's got more of a purpose than when she was afloat, because she's not being pulled from pillar to post simply because she was a problem ship. Yeah, I think it's just the times that she was built in, and technology wasn't quite there yet, I don't think, with the Burdigala. I think it was very in its infancy, and I think the Burdigala came just sort of suffered the brunt of all that, of the ever-growing technology, but it just wasn't quite there. And I think they ran before they could walk when it came to building the Burdigala. I mean, it cost around just over £500,000 to build her. You imagine how much money they would have spent to get it right.
It is sad, but it's such a great story, and I've really come to appreciate the Burdigala story more than ever. And hopefully, I got the night right, because my French is pretty bad.
Yes, it's the Burdigala. It's very easy to pronounce. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But I mean, with me, I mean, obviously, you know me as Britannic, Mr. Britannic, Britannic guy in the Olympic class and that. But I've come to appreciate ships that are connected to the Olympic class. You have to be. I mean, it's like I've said before. A lot of people are Titanic enthusiasts, and they focus on the Titanic quite a bit, and she kind of overshadows other ships. But I've always said, and I always will say, it's okay to look beyond the Titanic story, because you've got the Britannic. Titanic was just one of 3 ships. I will always love Titanic. She brought me to all these ships that I know now, but I've enjoyed my journey in exploring and teaching and learning these about not just the Titanic, but the Britannic, the Olympic, and the Burdigala, the Lusitania. They are all intertwined, and it's okay to give them a bit of love too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, it's perfectly fine, because the Britannic has got a fascinating history. The Burdigala's they've all got a fascinating history. Someone told me, said, why are you so interested in ships that sank 100 years ago? Why are you so interested? And I always say to them, is because it's a different era. It's so different to now, that, like I said, if people want to be Doctor Who, where they want to travel back in time, you can, but in your mind.
Yeah.
And what you look at, they are your time machine. You can go back and learn about their history. And I always say shipwrecks make the best stories because of the human cost, the human story that's involved in them. They make the best stories, but that's why I'm interested. That's why I love Titanic. That's why I love these shipwrecks, because they're so tragic.
But that was really, really great, Jake. Thank you so much for coming on once again. And I know we've got to talk about the Burdigala. I cannot pronounce that word.
Carpathia.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Carpathia's next time, yes.
Yeah, next time. But then you're back not long after this one, because you are going to be back with a very, very exclusive special interview as well, because it is going to be another anniversary this month. So,
yes, yeah, with the Carpathia, yes, it will be. Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Is that the one you're talking about, Carpathia? Yes. There's that many. we got Captain Bartlett and Kate Phillips and all them. We've got them to cover. So I've got so many. It's like keeping.
And that we definitely won't stop doing that. We'll just probably doing more and more. But I cannot wait.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do more. I love doing these, and I know other people like hearing me talk. I don't know why, but thank you anyway.
You were bright and upbeat.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I do. I love teaching. I love talking about these stories and sharing these stories and yeah, and teaching people that something they probably didn't know about.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and
thank you.
you're welcome, Jake, and it's always a pleasure. But we definitely got to talk about the Carpathia, and then once it's up, it's good to go. I'm naturally quite excited for this one. So
Yes,
my
I'm
fingers crossed.
excited too.
But yeah, but it was really great, Jake, and I'll probably see you next time for the Carpathia. And
Yeah.
until then, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, this has been History Inside a Nutshell, departing from the docks. Thank you so much for all of your support and enjoy the rest of your voyage.